Hello, hello, and welcome to Self-Care is Sexy. My name is Chris, and I'll be your host. We're a podcast that's here to generate and share self-care ideas with each other. Last episode, I gave you some great tips on how to sneak a little bit of self-care into your day, no matter how busy you might be or how far behind you might feel. I got into some certain mindset shifts to help you start to look at everyday tasks and to-dos through that self-care lens. I want to give you a quick preview of what to expect from today's show. Today's show, I'm bringing you an incredible interview that I did with Elizabeth Miller from the Happy Healthy Caregiver. She found herself as a sandwich generation caregiver, taking care of young kids and elderly parents at the same time. And from that really challenging point in her life, she created this amazing resource for the rest of us. She talks openly about her struggles as well as her solutions, from combining responsibility with self-care to how she makes herself a priority. It's a great show, and she's an amazing resource, regardless if you are a caregiver or not. We've got that interview coming up after a quick break.
First of all, thank you so very much for coming on the show. I am tickled pink that I found you and your awesome content. Let's go ahead and get started by just having you introduce yourself.
Fabulous. Thanks for having me, Chris. I am Elizabeth Miller. I'm talking to you from outside of Atlanta, Georgia today. I am a former sandwich generation caregiver, which means I was squeezed between caring for older adult parents while raising kids at the same time. And I was working full time. And my husband was also a sandwich generation family caregiver, and that he was caring for his mom simultaneously. And that experience and really things started coming to a head back in 2014. We called that our spiral year, and we were spiraling out of control and burning out, feeling overwhelmed, feeling isolated, feeling not healthy, not happy, and just didn't really know how to kind of get out of it. Figured, why is this so hard? And so that's really what prompted me to start my company called Happy Healthy Caregiver. And at first, it was primarily an outlet for me while I was working full time. I had no business starting a business while trying to manage and keep my head above water. But it was really an important outlet for me in that I had this space to pour out my feelings, process things that were going on through journaling or really blogging at the time. And that was the first part of it. And I actually probably should even back up a little bit, Chris. Like before it even started blogging, I really had this light bulb moment when I was caring for my parents that if I didn't make a change in my life as far as like prioritizing my own health and happiness, I was going to potentially put my children in the same position that my husband and I were in. We were caring for three individuals who all had made poor lifestyle choices, frankly, that had put us in this position. So I made this like mindset shift. And before there was even a website, there was just it was my own personal Instagram page where I thought, I'm going to do 100 days of healthy, and I'm going to figure out how to prioritize my own health and happiness. And from there, and I know we'll get into it, like it's expanded into, I'm a public speaker, I'm an author, I'm a fellow podcaster, I'm a certified caregiving consultant, which means I coach family caregivers. And this is my life now. I do this full time since 2021, and family caregivers, which means the people who are just caring for friends and family, often unpaid, often untrained, always overwhelmed. Those are my people.
That's really awesome. This is the thing I really love about you and about your content is that you had a challenge. You needed a resource. So you created and became your own resource. I love that.
Yeah, it was really helping me while I was helping others. Like, I do a support group here in Atlanta. I started that up. I was like, we don't have one. We need one, and I became involved. At the time, we had a women's employee resource group where I worked, and so caregiving discussions became a big part of that. And, it's kind of part of my DNA. It sounds like it's part of your DNA too. It's just like, okay, here we are with a problem. I can see this spiral continuing to go down. I know what I don't want this to look like. And so I'm choosing to do something different. It hasn't been easy. It's been a labor of love, but it has definitely been fulfilling. And honestly, like, self-care is a priority for me. Like, what I coach, I also live by.
That's kind of rare. So I'm going to that's exactly what I want to dive in with you. So, getting to kind of look at your story and seeing you had a need arise out of 2014, your spiral year, and you create this resource. And now fast forward to this resource has become like you're running multiple facets of a business. How do you get time to take care of yourself?
Yeah, it's intentional, right? I know you coach in this too. I will say initially, like back in 2014, 2015, I was fixated and obsessed really mostly with physical self-care, like eating right and exercise, and, even sleep kind of came later. And as I've matured kind of through this process, self-care for caregivers is, and what I believe for self-care for me and my own definition is like anything that's going to help me feel more energized, anything that's going to give me peace of mind, and anything that's just plain fun for me. So, those are my things. And I really now have expanded my self-care content that I put out into the world for family caregivers, and I talk about in my talks, to 8 categories of self-care. Like, it's not just the physical. It's emotional, it's financial, spiritual, practical, intellectual, social, and professional. Trying all these things on over the years to kind of say what works for me. Okay, this works for me. I'm going to keep doing this, and I'm going to kind of scrap the things that don't work for me. And on the podcast, over time, things have elevated, and I've added, the podcast is now 6 years old this month. What's different about the podcast is that it is highlighting self-care strategies and caregiving strategies from real family caregivers, because they are the experts in family caregiving. Yes, to your point, like, I have choices. I'm never going to be bored as a solopreneur. I'm an empty nester now, and I'm not actively a primary caregiver for anybody at this moment. I am a support caregiver. I have an older brother that has a developmental and intellectual disability, and he lives half the year with my sister in Michigan, half the year, about 30 minutes away from me with a brother. And I become, my role picks up when he's back in Georgia as far as what that looks like. So yeah, I'll never be bored, but that looks like for me, journaling. Journaling has been writing, with blogging. And then I wrote a journal with caregivers in mind called the Just For You Daily Self-Care Journal. It's a prompted journal. It makes journaling a light lift for people. I've also done some art journaling over the years. What I have found to be essential for me even now, and particularly through COVID, is something I don't find the time, I create the time to do, is getting out in nature every day. I got to get outside. Like, I have 2 dogs, so they need to get outside too. And so we take some micro walks, throughout the day, usually in the morning, midday, and in the evening, reading and writing. And I'm new into pickleball with my husband, and I think that's nice. I during caregiving years, I had to get creative on what self-care looked like for me. And so often I would have to combine things. Like, I would call them a twofer, or buy one, get one, where I needed to spend more time with my girlfriends or my husband, and I needed to take care of myself. So maybe that was like a walk, or in this case, playing pickleball with my husband. So things like that become important to me. Even a drive to work, when we were working in the office, I would use that for intellectual self-care and learn how to start a business and market my business and learn how to care better, and sometimes just for enjoyment, like reading audiobooks. So I'm all over the place, but hopefully that gives you a little bit into my headspace.
No, I love it. It's perfect, because you're right. There are situations where you can be actively doing something and getting self-care in. So I absolutely love that. I have kind of a sort of sidebar topic question, just from listening to you and really engaging with what you're talking about. I wanted to get your opinion on whether or not you think there are certain people that shouldn't be caregivers, whether it's, taking care of somebody, just their family member, or as their profession.
Yeah, I think we all have strengths and weaknesses, right? Like, and even if I'm looking and talking about myself, like I am a better cheerleader for family caregivers than I was a hands-on caregiver. Like I was a tough love person for my mom, and that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. You know, it needed to be essential for her physical therapy, her occupational therapy, that I would often push back. And, you know, she was I saw her as part of the care team. She needed to keep doing things for as long as she could do them. So I do think that some people are just naturally equipped nurturers. And it takes all kinds of people. Like, even if you're not the hands-on kind of a caregiver, there is a role for you in an expanded care team. Like if you are supporting the caregiver, maybe you're living a remote distance away from somebody, but you could potentially take on the financial bill paying or the research of medications and senior living options, or just, you know, helping to communicate what's going on with the broader family. So I think nobody, in my opinion, should kind of get the cop out of like, oh, I can't do this. Like, I can't be a caregiver. But I think it's what parts can you do, and how do you divide and conquer among your family members and your friends to not have it all on one person's shoulders, because that's not successful. I mean, even when you look at like a senior living option, they have so many people. They have all these aides and, you know, the people who are doing the cooking and the people who are engaging activities and transporting people. And the same thing needs to be true if we're kind of, you know, trying to help people live independently, you know, whether they're older adults or kids with special needs. And some people don't have the choice, right? Like if you're a parent and this is your life, and you know, I think once you kind of accept it and, you know, through coaching and other things, you can kind of get there, then work with somebody to kind of figure out what your solution and your system can look like, so that you can better mitigate caregiver burnout. And that's really what the goal is to make this sustainable, you know, whether it's a short season or like this is your life.
That's awesome. Most of the times I at least see it in my, you know, peer groups and things like that it is primarily one person doing all the work. Typically that one person is not so great at delegating or asking for help. So what I hear from you is that if you're the sister, the brother, the friend of somebody who's in that situation, just being the one to be like, hey, let me figure out the grocery shopping or ordering or whatever. How can I like get creative in how you can support people that are kind of taking it on? That's what I'm hearing from you, and I love that.
And that's self-care, right? Like that is emotional self-care. That's practical self-care. Like that, to me, that is self-care. You're getting peace of mind. You're going to preserve your energy sources. So I have some worksheets actually, Chris, that I will email you the link to in case you want to put them in the show notes of your podcast, about like family responsibilities, caregiving responsibilities, even holiday responsibilities, because we all have full plates. And to your point, like it does usually fall on the women, and it does usually end up on one person. But we have the power of deciding what is in our control and what is not. And broadening our care circle is a big thing that I, you know, coach a lot about, and talking about family dynamics and encouraging people to share the care and offering them some ideas of maybe ways that they hadn't thought about approaching this before. It's hard, you know, it's hard. And then what happens then when you're delegating is that then you have that time to reclaim for yourself. I know one of the things I hated to hear as a family caregiver was, you should take care of yourself, or you should be doing this better for your parent or your loved one. And it would make me crazy. I just wanted to like curl up in a corner and cry about it, because I was like, you don't understand like everything that I'm juggling at this time. So I don't want to should on people, but I do want to kind of offer them this cornucopia, plethora of different options that they can try on and see maybe this might work. So much of it is trial and error. And if somebody's listening out there that is a solo caregiver right now, like one of the things that really resonated with me is you'll hear often from folks in this care economy space, you know, you need to put your oxygen mask on yourself before you can care for others, like the airplane analogy. It's a good analogy.
I use that one all the time. Yeah.
It's a good analogy. It's convenient. But it did not resonate with me as a family caregiver. And here's why. Like that's a one-time situation and a crisis situation. that is very like, of course that makes sense. But in your daily life, and the average caregiver is a caregiver for 4.5 years of their life, like that is not sustainable. And so for me, the analogy that really helped me better was feeding the nest of hungry birds. And I wrote a post about this because I pictured myself as the mother robin, and I had this nest of open-mouthed hungry birds, and they represented my work, my pets, my home, my relationships with my husband, my girlfriends, my kids, my job, and my caregiver, my care recipient. And they're all screaming at the same time. You are having to make really hard decisions about where you're going to spend your reserves of energy. And who kind of gets that, over a week's time, let's say you're kind of figuring that out. And at the same time, what really was the light bulb moment for me is like, if I do not take some of this nourishment of like going out and getting the nourishment and giving it to other birds in the nest, if I don't take some for myself, I am not going to be able to keep going out to do the hunting and gathering and bringing it back to nourish other people.
Oh man, I love this analogy right now. This is perfect. I hope it's okay. I'm totally gonna steal that because
yes.
Oh,
that's the highest
so cool.
compliment, Chris. When something resonates, because we need simple analogies like that for people to understand. You have to figure out how to make this sustainable. Like if you are one person doing everything, and you are not investing in your own health and happiness and prioritizing that is a recipe for disaster and caregiver burnout. And that Absolutely. Is what we want to avoid. Like, both of us, like the more we can kind of blast this message out to folks, the bigger ripple effect of positive change is going to have, and we're all going to win. So mindset of abundance. I love it. We're stronger together.
Absolutely. I know my listeners get blasted with a lot of content. I often say, like, don't get overwhelmed by all the content, but just going through all of your different stuff that you've got going on, it's clear that you take this holistic approach. You've got like a playlist on Spotify, you've got the journal, you've got your WCN course, which I'm like, I'm going to check that out. That looks amazing. So you've got all this support and all these different resources. Can you share with our listeners, like, how they can get to some of this great stuff that you've got and how they can connect with you?
Thank you. Yes, definitely check out the website. Everything's there, happyhealthycaregiver.com. I have a podcast, Happy Healthy Caregiver, that's available on all the platforms. You can search and subscribe to that. And there's only 2 episodes a month, so totally doable to consume and maybe pair it with a walk or something. And then I would say my newsletter. Like, I put a lot of this content in my weekly roundup newsletter. I always share something happy, something healthy, something caregiving related, and then maybe a few other surprises in there. And they can sign up for that at bit.ly/HHCE news. And there's, that way you're kind of getting, instead of like drinking from a blast of the fire hose, it's just like a little drip, every week. Yeah.
And I'll definitely make sure to link all of these resources, not only in our show notes, but at our website as well. Thank you so much for coming on the show and doing this interview with me today.
Thank you, Chris. I'm grateful for this time together, and I hope this just has a positive impact on even one listener, then we're winning.
Oh my gosh, you guys, that was so much fun. I love Liz. She's just so down to earth, and I got so much from her experience. If you want to tap into her services and her content, again, regardless if you're a caregiver or not, you can find all of her amazing coaching, podcast, and resources at www.happyhealthycaregiver.com. That's it for this week. Thank you for joining me. If you have a story you'd like to share and you want to be on the show, please email me. It's Chris, Kris, at selfcareissexy.com. Okay, we've got some really great content coming your way, so stay tuned. And remember that self-care is sexy. We're giving you permission to put yourself first.